By nightfall, she had nowhere to sleep. The town had already turned its back on her. And winter was coming fast. By sunset, the stagecoach tracks were already fading. Mara Collins stood alone on the dirt road of Red Hollow, her leather travel bag resting beside her boots. The coach that was supposed to take her north had left a day earlier. The storm had delayed her just long enough to ruin everything. The ranch owner's letter had been clear. Arrive by the 15th, or don't come at all. Now the station clerk barely looked at her as he spoke. Next coach is in 4 weeks. 4 weeks might as well have been a lifetime. The wind cut through her coat, sharp and cold. Mara pulled it tighter, painfully aware of how she stood out, too tall, too broad-shouldered, too different for towns like this. She had learned long ago that people noticed before they listened. Is there another way to reach the North Spur Ranch? She asked. The clerk snorted. Only if you've got a horse and a death wish. That trail eats men alive. He finally looked at her then, judgment clear in his eyes. A woman traveling alone wouldn't last a day. Mara said nothing. She picked up her bag and turned away. Red Hollow was smaller than she'd imagined. A general store, a saloon, a crooked church, and a boarding house leaning like it might give up any day now. At least she could find a bed. She was wrong. The boarding house refused her outright. The saloon laughed her out the door. By the time the sun dipped low, the cold was settling in fast, and Mara had nowhere left to go. The diner was her last hope. Warm air from a cast-iron stove wrapped around her the moment she stepped inside. Mara ordered stew and coffee, stretching the meal as long as she could, knowing once it ended, so did her shelter. The place was nearly empty, except for one man sitting alone near the back. He looked weathered, mid-40s maybe, dark hair threaded with gray. Not dangerous. Not friendly either. Just tired. When the waitress quietly told her they were closing, panic tightened in Mara's chest. I understand, she said, reaching for her bag. Where will you go? The voice came from behind her. She turned. The man had stood, keeping a respectful distance. His eyes were calm, steady, the kind that had seen loss and survived it. I don't know, she admitted. He studied her for a moment longer than most men dared. You're the seamstress meant for North Spur, aren't you? I was. He nodded once. Storm caught you. Yes. Silence hung between them, heavy but not uncomfortable. It's too cold to be out tonight, he finally said. Come with me. She should have refused. A stranger. A strange town. But the cold outside was worse than fear. He led her to a small cabin at the edge of town. Clean. Simple. A fire already burning. He laid blankets on a padded bench near the hearth. You'll sleep here, he said. Safe and warm. Not his bed. Just kindness. My name's Caleb Reed, he added. Mara Collins. That night, listening to the fire crackle, Mara slept deeper than she had in months. Morning came with the smell of coffee and frying bacon. Caleb didn't ask questions. He didn't pry. Over the next few days, Mara found work sewing for the pastor's wife. The pay was small, but honest. Enough to stay. People noticed, of course. Whispers followed her through town. Some work disappeared. Other work came quietly, from women who didn't care what Red Hollow thought. She learned Caleb's story slowly. A wagon accident. A wife and child gone. A man who had chosen isolation as punishment. You don't seem broken, Mara told him one evening. Caleb stared into the fire. Broken doesn't always show. They lived carefully. Respectfully. Too close to ignore what was growing, too cautious to name it. When an old acquaintance from Mara's past arrived, bringing shame and loud accusations, the town expected her to fold. She didn't. And for the first time, Red Hollow didn't turn away. Someone spoke up. Then another. The silence broke. That night, Caleb finally said the truth he'd been holding back. I don't want to lose you. Mara didn't hesitate. Then don't. Winter hit hard. Snow buried the roads. Illness followed close behind. When Caleb collapsed with fever, Mara stayed by his side for 8 nights straight. She fed him. Cooled him. Spoke to him when he couldn't answer. You're not done yet, she whispered. You're still needed. He lived. Spring came slow, but it came. They married quietly, no spectacle, no promises shouted loud enough for the town. Just truth, spoken steady. The cabin grew. A small sewing shop was built beside it. People began stopping by, travelers, lost souls, families starting over. Caleb said yes the way he once had to Mara. One evening, standing together as the prairie turned gold, a stranger asked where she lived. Mara smiled. Right here. Caleb nodded, pulling her close. Right here. And in those 2 words lived everything they had survived. And everything they had chosen.